Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. This is Stephen Kirkpatrick with Executive Speakers on Speakers Zoomcast. Today, I am very privileged to have author, futurist, and all-around good guy, Ben Hammersley, with us today. Ben is joining us from Brooklyn, and we're happy to have him. So Ben, want to start off with this very important question. What is the coolest city in the UK?
Ooh, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been there, to be honest. I've been here in the US for 6 years, and before that, I was in Paris and Italy and China and lots of places. So I'm more of a tourist there than many of our viewers, I think.
No, I didn't know if you were going to say London. I don't know if you were going to say Birmingham.
No, I mean definitely London. It's one of the premier global cities, or at least it was before the pandemic. I don't suppose there's anybody there today other than Londoners, but yes, London is. I can show you some good places, Stephen. Put it that way.
I mean, like, again, there's no doubt, but I was kind of hoping you'd have like a really out of the way. It's like, well, so there's actually a place that's like 55 kilometers outside of London, and that's the coolest place.
The problem with the UK is that it's very, very small, and when you're talking to somebody who lives, especially in the US, the sense of scale, it can be quite disturbing. And so, for example, where I used to live in central London, I could get on the train and be literally one stop on the train from downtown Paris. And that would take me, 2.5 hours, which is probably the distance that you would drive for a good pizza. So it's the sense of scale is very different. You can be in Amsterdam in 45 minutes on a plane. So where is the best place in outside of London? Amsterdam, maybe.
It's only a 45-minute plane ride. I'm sure they have lots of nonstop flights.
Right, and so yeah, the scale is very different. But I grew up in a small village in the East Midlands, about 100 miles north of London, and it was a village that was founded in something like the year 800, and it has a ruined castle in the village.
How cool is that?
But it wasn't a ruin. It was actually because it was never finished. It's actually just the remains of a half-finished castle. And the reason the castle wasn't finished was because the man who was building it in 1080 something got on the wrong side of the king, William the Conqueror, and was beheaded on a hill outside the
Hate it when that happens.
Yeah, and so that put the end to his sort of home improvement project.
Yeah.
But the hill he was beheaded on was ever since then has been called Blood's Hill because the blood of his body ran down it, and it's a
Sure.
very steep hill. And so in the winter, that's where when I was a child we used to go sort of tobogganing and to hurl ourselves down a steep slope whenever it was snowing.
Was there like an urban legend, like, no one ever found the head, like you may find it kind of thing?
It wouldn't be surprising because so you may remember a few years ago the body of Richard III was found underneath a car park in a parking lot in Leicester, which about 8 miles away from there. So I mean that's the thing with some of those old world countries is that you really only have to sort of dig down a few feet and you've hit something very old and
Sure.
skeleton or a battle site or a plague pit or
Gosh.
something like that.
All all funny and interesting things. So, I would think if William the Conqueror was king, you would probably try and do everything you could to not get on his bad side. But
Right. Well, apparently
alas,
this guy was actually one of his colleagues who'd come over from Normandy, from France, and helped him conquer the UK. And then I think he got a little bit sort of too big for his boots or something, and there was some local politics, and so he was in the ultimate power move. He was removed from the political debate by the medium of an axe.
well, there you go. It's swift end, right? not so much a democratic process.
Okay.
So, well, good. Well, Ben, hey, I'm so excited to talk to you because I know there's been a lot going on in your brain and what you've been talking to companies about and consulting about. Current speech topic, not current speech topic, one of the ones I know you're talking a lot about. It's called the Great Reassessment.
That's right. So we're now talking towards the end of July 2020. So we have been in the middle of a pandemic, depending on where you are on the planet, for 6 months. And this has had many, many effects, as everybody knows, the lockdown, the working from home, all of that sort of thing. And that working from home process amongst the large corporations, and specifically the large knowledge work corporations, the sort of areas where people do things with information and data rather than doing things with physical objects, digging holes in the ground or manufacturing or something like that. But the areas of work where people sit in front of a screen and think about things, that's changed quite radically over the past 6 months in interesting ways, in that when the lockdown happened, as the lockdown started to roll across the planet, we found that companies were needing to have their businesses continue to work, but everybody had to work from home. And that meant that those companies had to very, very rapidly re-engineer their processes to be able to do that. And so, you and I and everybody had to make sure that all of our systems could work from our laptops wherever we were, or from our home offices, and so on. And that was the same for small companies, but it was also the same for very large multinationals, and even companies like large petrochemical companies, where sure, they do have huge industrial installations, but their headquarters staff all had to separate and work from home. And this had a very interesting effect, which is that for the past 10, maybe 20 years, and people like me have been talking a lot about the future of the workplace and the future of digitization, the use of artificial intelligence, all of those things. And whenever we've spoken about them, we've had to speak about them as either something that new companies adopt from the beginning, or that existing companies either make a leap and adopt in one big jump, or it's something that will be brought into a company through the natural process of systems being replaced over time. And so we would be talking about things like artificial intelligence in the workplace as something which would be happening over the next 3 to 5 years, for example. What happened in the first month or so of the pandemic, as the lockdowns rolled across the planet, those corporations realized that if their senior staff or their knowledge working staff had to work from home, that meant that they had to radically reassess their systems, their processes, their IT, all of that. And whilst they were doing that, in order to be able to get the systems to work, in the boss's home office, then that was the opportunity that they could take to reassess everything. Because if you're ordering laptops for everybody, you might as well order all of the shiny toys that you want to order. And you can do some interesting accounting around that and all of that sort of thing as well. And so, this meant that all of the things that we've spoken about the future of work for, like I say, the past 10 or 20 years, happened over about a weekend.
Yeah.
You had companies
forced change.
Yeah, and so you had it was forced change, exactly. You had companies who,
it's like relegation in the Premier League, right?
Exactly that. Or actually,
you can use that too. I mean, like seriously, one of your talks, you can use that. Like, hey, I got this great example of what this is like.
Well, I can actually improve it by saying it's actually more like being promoted to the Premier League, in that you've got going from relatively, from a very difficult league, with one particular class of working and one particular class of playing and training and equipment and all of that, and then suddenly over the course of a summer, you suddenly find yourself having to compete at a completely different level. And that's what's happened, is that we now have this understanding that over the spring, the world of the large corporate or the medium-sized corporate split into two. You had the companies that looked at the crisis and went, okay, here is our opportunity to reassess everything that we're doing from the standpoint of this great uncertainty and all of the other changes that have happened since we last thought about it. The massive changes in technology, the massive changes in society and culture, and so on and so on. And those companies radically transformed themselves or began the process of radical transformation, whereas the companies who said, we will bunker down and we will just keep things ticking over so that when things return to normal, we'll just be able to continue on as we were in January. Those companies, I think, now are realizing that they made a terrible mistake, which is that things are never, ever going to go back to normal. And more to the point, the new ways of doing things, the new evolutions of doing things are, in so many ways, better, more efficient, more powerful, more interesting, more revolutionary, and also more appealing to potential staff and customers than the old way of doing things. And so it's not just been that the economies have been put on pause or people have been working from home, it's that the economies were put on pause and now they're coming out of pause in a lot of places. They're coming out radically different. And so I've been, through my work over the past few months, I've been helping my clients really identify what's changed in their marketplaces, but also identify the changes and the opportunities for transformation that they can take to put themselves in a position where not only can they prosper today, but when everything really kicks off properly, maybe this time next year, then they will be far, far ahead of their previous rivals.
It's really good talking about it on a macro level. I mean, because I think you said, there's so many processes and again too, hardship can be taken both ways. Take it as a hardship or as an opportunity. And I think you're kind of the person that says, hey, this can be a really good opportunity for you to make some changes that are coming down the road. So I want to take it to a little bit to a micro level. And one of the things that you said, talk about digitization, how digitization's kind of been going on for a while. How do you see this pandemic specifically accelerating and or changing how people have looked at digitization in the workplace?
Okay, so I think with this, it's very worthwhile to go back almost to first principles, which is what is digitization in the first place, and why is it weird? So if you forgive me, let's do that very quickly. The old way of talking about this was the difference between bits and atoms. Everybody knows how atoms work. Everybody knows how stuff operates, right? Stuff has certain physical qualities which make it stuff. So, for example, this pencil, as a good example. This pencil has physical mass, it has cost if I want to move it, if I want to send it to you, then I have to physically ship it, which has cost and all of that sort of thing. There's only one of this is unique, so if I give it to you, then you have it and I no longer have it, and so on and so on. It requires manufacturing, it requires storage, it requires all these different things. This is a physical thing, it's made of bits. If this was a digital object, if it was, say, an MP3 file, it would have a completely different set of qualities. An MP3 file has no mass, more or less, and so sending an MP3 file costs a trivial amount, such a trivial amount of money that we don't even bother counting it. So the cost of me sending you an MP3 file is zero. And furthermore, if I send you a copy of an MP3, I still have that MP3, and now you have. MP3, and the MP3 that you have is identical to mine, is absolutely a perfect copy, and you could make an infinite number of copies, again for free, and distribute that again for free, and so on and so on. Now, the reason I bring up those differences is because the difference between being fully digital and being analog and based in some physical objects is radical. Because as soon as you get all of your business processes out of physical things,
Mm-hmm.
physical pieces of paper, physical filing cabinets, physical places, the need to be in an office or be in a specific location because that's where the pieces of paper come in through the door that you have to then look at. Whatever those, once you get away from that physical stuff, then it doesn't matter where you are on the planet, because the location makes no difference. Now, this became an important point in February and March, because as countries locked down and people had to work from home, they could no longer go to the office. They were now in a location which, as far as their organizations was concerned, would either be home, or it could be on Mars, or it could be on, in Tahiti. It didn't really make any difference as long as they were connected to the internet. And so those companies, as other companies have been doing over the past 20 years, had to change all of their physical processes, all of their business processes, from physical things, where you had to be in a place where the post arrived, or you had to be next to the fax machine and wait for the fax to physically come out of the machine. They changed all of their processes to mean that they didn't have to be in a place.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, if you are forced to re-engineer your business processes so that you don't have to be in a place, that radically changes what you can do. It means that all of the information that's coming into the organization can be manipulated as if it's data rather than if it's a physical thing. That means you suddenly have lots and lots and lots of new and interesting and highly advanced tools that you can use on that information. Because if you're no longer dealing with physical mail or physical inputs, then it's, by definition, they're digital things, and if they're digital files, you can do things to them with maths and with artificial intelligence and so on, which you couldn't do to a physical object.
Sure.
And it also meant that it forced people into the much more digital ways of collaborating, whether that's talking over Zoom like this, or whether it's
Fortnite,
inside Fortnite,
Red Dead 2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The 3D worlds and so on, which I'll demonstrate later, but also people introducing shared workspaces like Slack, and using collaborative editing tools like Google Docs, and all of those sorts of things. And so what this did was it took all of these companies and accelerated them into the modern tooled workspace, but then also changed the nature of the organization itself. Because once everybody is equipped, once the organization is equipped to do that, once the organization is equipped for everybody to be able to work from anywhere on the planet, because they're all working from home, that radically changes the nature of a company. It radically changes the nature of an organization, and it also radically changes the nature of you as an individual and how you see your work and your career. Because if you're no longer going to an office between 9 and 6 every day, or whatever your habitual working hours are, if you no longer have the majority of your social interactions around your colleagues, if you no longer have a physical location being the nexus of your organization, it very radically changes the psychology of and the self-identity of the employees and the organization itself. And this is both full of potential to do really interesting things, but is also very, very different for the way that the vast majority of people in the world have ever operated before. And so that is also full of intensely stressful and for many people very, very difficult to cope with things around the transformation of the workplace. And so all of these things need to be thought about deeply and managed, and that's what I try and help people to do.
So I want to go to just to a little bit different road on this. So, we talk about digitization in the workplace. But I think that one of the things that comes up when you think about digitization is safety. And thinking about safety of IP, safety of ideas, safety of work. Because I'm in an office, we lock our office, there's a security system, so we feel safe, right? Someone has to physically break in, and if someone breaks in, then there's a camera that catches them, an alarm goes off, police come, and things like that. But I think a lot of times in the digital world, there's a greater cognitive risk that some people place on there, but there's also just again new ways to think about how do we keep our quote unquote business safe, since we don't have files and things like that, or that we can put under lock and key, basically. Is that something that is that a question people are asking, or?
It is, but it actually raises a further question. So yes, absolutely, the security.
Yes, please take it one step further.
Well, exactly. So absolutely. In the first instance, the security of the data, the security around the digital conversations, around intellectual property, all of those things are of paramount importance, and there is a good deal of cybersecurity risk out there of theft, of phishing, of espionage, of all of those sorts of standard things, and those things are not new. They've been around for a long time, and they certainly haven't been induced by the pandemic. Maybe the risks have gone up as more and more companies are operating in this remote manner, and so more business critical information is traveling over the network. But in general, for the vast majority of people, that's really a solved problem in that for the vast majority of organizations, the security that's available on the market is certainly ample to deal with the sorts of threats that those companies would have to encounter. The vast majority of companies are not going to face a nation state level of sophistication in hacking attempts. If you are a key industry, if you're a petrochemicals company or a large IT company or a pharmaceutical company or something like that, then absolutely you have to have a very dedicated IT security team who protect you from the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians and so on. But if you're a speaker agency, for example, you're not going to be hacked by the FSB.
Hope not. Hopefully the FSB's got better things to do.
Sure. Now you may be hacked by another speaker agency, but
this is true.
But those guys almost certainly aren't nearly as sophisticated as the FSB are, and so regular off-the-shelf security and good security practices and so on.
If you just put me on a list because you mentioned FSB, I'm gonna be really mad at you because we were talking about it.
I'm sorry. If you see a black helicopter land outside, I'll tell your family.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Where's Steven? He disappeared.
That's right. Yeah.
We don't know. He was doing a Zoomcast and he disappeared.
We don't talk about him.
We don't know.
But what is a risk and what is a whole new thing is that it's requiring companies to think about what else can leave the building at the end of the day. And that's actually a really interesting question when it comes to services companies and creative companies.
Mm-hmm.
The value within the organization, sure, there's potential value in the data, there's potential value in work in progress, there's potential value to be found, if somebody reads your email or something like that. But the real value in an organization is actually inside the people's heads. It's inside the expertise and the skills and the tacit and also explicit knowledge of the employees. And so this is the risk that I think many companies are going to be facing in the next few months, which is that you have highly talented knowledge workers who are who have to work from home.
Right.
They're working from home, and and over the past few months, they've re-equipped their home office with modern day technology and modern day tools. They brought everything up to date. They've got a really nice chair to sit in. They've got their desk set up well. They're all, they're now bringing themselves up
They
to
have their Zoom backgrounds, everything's picked out.
exactly right. They've got the beautiful virtual backgrounds and everything set up, and now they're realizing, hang on a second, because I no longer have a commute, because I no longer have endless in-person meetings, because I no longer have to sort of, in quotes, waste time on the social interactions inside the office and that sort of thing. All I have to do is get my work done.
Mm-hmm.
And I can no longer be sort of ethically tracked in terms of, if I'm not in the office, I'm obviously not working. It's not as if when you're working from home, that it's really fair or sensible or wise management to say that your employees have to be sat at their desk in the
Sure.
right? And so because of this, the highly talented members of the community, those sorts of employees are realizing, I think now, that their place in the ecosystem is much larger than it was before. That previously the dominant thing was the company, and the company provided shelter and heat and light and equipment, and you needed all of those things to be able to do the work. And now the company's business processes have been reimagined to enable people to work remotely. That means that the company no longer has to provide heat and light and shelter and so on. And that means that the most important thing, the critical thing, the thing that would stop the organization from working entirely is the members of staff and their talents. And this means that we're seeing, at least in the areas of industry which are today starting to move, where the economy is starting to kick back in, is that the highly talented employees are starting to go, at least in their heads, are going freelance.
Right.
They're saying, well, I can get all my work done for my employer, before lunchtime, and then I have all the gear to basically just use my talents
To play Fortnite.
Well, either to play Fortnite or to do other projects. And
Sure.
we're starting to see a very interesting sort of shift in organizational structure away from a sort of the corporate model and towards a sort of structure which we've only ever seen before in special forces and in Hollywood movie production, which are individually very, very talented and very skilled people who currently work on a mission or on a movie with this group of people. But when that mission is done or when that movie is finished, that group of people spreads out.
Disperses. Yeah.
And then a clump of them with some other people will come back together again over here and make something else or do something else. And we've been talking about that in terms of corporate work for many, many years, but it's never been possible because organizations never went that extra step in terms of allowing their processes to re-engineering their processes to allow that to happen. And the pandemic has meant that has caused that, has meant that to happen, made that happen. And so now we have this very interesting time where companies are realizing that the heart of their company are in the brains of their most talented employees. At exactly the same moment, those most talented employees are realizing that they could go and do more interesting things with other people. And so it's making things a lot more fluid in the face of all of this uncertainty and change.
No, but again, I mean, I think it's really interesting the point you make, just as far as, the freedom that it allows workers, and again, I think the Hollywood model is really interesting. You have someone who signs on as a producer for a film at, Fox, and the next one they go to, ABC Disney,
Right.
and so it's, and sometimes they sign a 2-3 picture deal, but it's not an indefinite 25-year golden watch kind of thing. It's more of a per project basis and things like that. That's very interesting. And, it's really interesting. Okay. So, we're running out of time, but I want to ask one question, and this is kind of going in the same vein, but it's really, really interesting, because I think too, one of the things that people aren't talking about very much, but I think this pandemic has very, much power in the ability to disrupt our education system.
This is I think the sort of the core example, right? So imagine that you are a student today, like you're about to go to college today, and you're lining yourself up to go to say Harvard, right? Harvard costs 50 grand, a year. So by the time, and plus living expenses and all of that. So by the time you graduate, in ordinary times, you're going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. That is justified, I think sketchily personally, but nevertheless, it is justified by people by saying, well, the education you get at Harvard is second to none, but more to the point, the network making and the socializing are incredibly valuable. Harvard is not reopening in September. They are doing all of their classes online. So you'll get the teaching, but you don't get any of the socialization. You don't get any of the network making. This means you start to ask some interesting questions, which is, if you're going there, what am I paying for? Mm-hmm. They're not doing live lectures, then why can't everybody go there? Now, we've had that discussion many times over the years. 10 or 12 years ago, I think, there was this long discussion about massively online courses. Mm-hmm. They were called MOOCs, and the idea
MOOCs, yeah, mm-hmm.
And many organizations started to offer those, but they were always seen as the sort of redhead stepchild of a quotes real degree, mm-hmm. right, or a real mm-hmm. education, because the better version would be to go to the place, enroll in the place, mm-hmm. be in the room. Now you can't be in the room; it would be suicide. In the room. And so because you can't be in the room, it means that you might as well take online courses. And so taking online courses, that then raises a very interesting question, which is, well, why do you want to take all of the courses with the one institution? Because sure, you're the calculus lecturer at Harvard might be the best one in the world, but the sociology lecturer, and you're taking a sociology course, a sociology lecturer is not the best in the world. The best in the world is actually at Oxford, and Oxford have an online course for that. So why not mix and match? Now, at a totally different strata of higher education, we found that that's already starting to happen. Over the past few years, University of Arizona, University of Phoenix, and a few others have been doing this, which is where they've been saying, okay, here are all of these courses that we have. They're all online. There's a whole menu of them, and you can choose the ones you want. And each one will get you a little, get you a certificate and an accreditation mm-hmm. in that thing, which you can use as a separate certification. So you can go to your employer and you can say, I have basic math skills, or I have data processing or data science or biology or whatever it is. So they're individual qualifications themselves, but when you have enough of those certificates, then they give you that degree, right? That model of adaptively taking courses over your 20s to build up your skills base, to build up your knowledge base as the world is changing, doing a 10-week course in data mm-hmm. science here, doing another 10-week course in Python programming there, doing a doing a 2-year course in international law, whatever it is, building up your
Right.
portfolio of stuff over online courses taken at different institutions for way less money than the 50 grand a year, you know, for 4 years in a row, only being taught by one set of staff
Mm-hmm.
alternative is not only a better education, not only leaves you in far less debt, but also is far more reflective of both the modern workplace
Mm.
and also the needs of the modern economy, which is that as a futurist, and I've said this to you before many times, as a futurist, if I go into a company and they say, can you tell me the exact future of our industry in 4 years' time, then I will turn them down. I can't. No one can. 4 years is in the current era. 4-year predictions are far too far away to be sensible.
Mm-hmm.
But we ask that of every single 18-year-old who's going to.
Yep. Yep. 100%.
They go,
Or 5. If you want to take a victory lap, you can go 5.
right, right, and even more so in Europe, where you actually in the UK, for example, where you declare your major at when you apply, right? So you declare your major at 17.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when you put your applications in to go to college when you're 18, and then you do that degree and you come out with a degree in that subject. You literally, probably even because of the way that it works, you probably actually had to declare when you were 14. Okay, and so the idea of being able to make a sensible decision
Really
about
early.
skills are necessary. What's the
Mm-hmm.
what's the modern workplace going to be ripe for in 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years time?
Who knows?
That I can make a $300,000 bet today on it
Mm-hmm.
for the privilege of sitting in front of a web browser and watching somebody in Boston talk at a camera is insane.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly the same thing that you have in modern corporations where they say, well, you want me to dedicate my entire life and intellect and 40, 50 hours a day, 40, 50 hours a week to this one organization, and I can't even go to its physical place.
Sure.
It's, as far as I'm concerned, that location is just a set of passwords and logins, right? I think the same mental model is going to flip, which is, yeah, I'll work with you, large corporate employer. We'll do it on a project basis, and I will work the amount of hours it takes for me to get the work done at the hours it takes for me to get the work done in the place of my choosing, because as far as you're concerned, all I am is a login into your system anyway.
Right.
Physically now I'm sat in Brooklyn, but we could be having this conversation and I could be sat anywhere. And the same thing is if I could go to Harvard in September and not move from this chair, or I could go to Oxford and not move from this chair, or as I did last weekend, I could attend 3 days of lectures at UCLA
Mm-hmm.
from this chair.
From that chair. That's a powerful chair.
Very powerful chair. And so the ramifications of that and all of the things I've been saying radically affect both the way you start companies, the way you run companies, the way you employ people, and the way that people can now think about their careers once everything restarts. I think to sum it up, as the economy starts to come back up, and these are things we're already seeing in, say, Europe and Asia, where they're months ahead of us. As things start to come back up, it is coming back up utterly transformed. It is not the way it was before, and that transformation is not just in the corporate level. It's mostly at the personal level from the employees, the way the employees are concerned. And I think the best example of that is a friend of mine the other day whose company went back to work in London last week, and that company is asking everybody to go back into the office, and and not simply for epidemiological reasons, but also for social reasons, every single employee is refusing. Yes, a lot of it is because they don't want to get COVID-19, but actually, the main reason is everyone simultaneously looked at the corporate lifestyle from their point of view and went, yeah, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah, I'm done.
I'm not having another commute. I'm
Yeah.
not going to sit myself on a train. Now, at the moment, if I sit myself on the, go on the tube, I'm likely to get a fatal disease. But even in the future, when everybody's been vaccinated, spending 2 hours, 3 hours a day traveling to an office and having to sit opposite colleagues, as opposed to being at home or being on the beach or managing my own time as what turns out to be the pivotal part of an organization, which is my own personal talent. I'm going to employ my personal talent in the way I see fit, and that means for many people working from home with the best possible tools and business practices. And so that's the great reassessment that's starting to happen, is that individuals as well as organizations are saying, hey, the way we did it before was actually kind of terrible.
Yeah. Interesting stuff, Ben. You're always very thought-provoking. So good stuff. Well, listen, I look forward to kind of seeing what comes out of your brain in the next weeks and months, and we'll keep pushing along. I hope you have a good rest of your day in Brooklyn. And again, thanks for the time, Ben. Good to see you.
Yeah, and good to see you too.